The briefing officer hadn't even looked up from his data slate. New Providence Colony. Luzhin Armada has full encirclement. Probability of colonial survival 0.3%. The percentage wasn't a statistic. It was a verdict. The colony was a deliberate piece of strategic bait, a mining outpost on a silicate rock designated K7-44, whose only true value was the 3 days of fleet mobilization it could theoretically buy the core systems. The Luzhin, with their cold, crystalline logic, had taken the bait perfectly. They didn't bombard. They didn't assault. They simply appeared, a silent constellation of dagger ships in high orbit, and performed a surgical severance. Supply lanes? Cut. Communications? Jammed into a blanket of white noise. Planetary sensors? Blinded. It was a textbook siege, executed with the sterile precision of a lab experiment. They awaited the inevitable rational response. The evacuation shuttles, the surrender signal, the cost-efficient transfer of ownership. Earth Command's response was irrational. Our insertion shuttle, the Whisper, was a shadow among shadows. No grand armada, no thundering declaration of intent, just 8 of us in light infantry kit, breathing the recycled air that smelled of ozone and anticipation. The orders filtered into our helmet comms, the voice synthetic, devoid of inflection. Mission Priority Alpha, hold the line. Sergeant Rourke's eyes, pale and calculating, met each of ours in the dim red light. No further explanation was needed. We weren't an army, we were a message, a stopwatch thrown onto the strategic board. Our presence declared to the Luzhin and to ourselves that time itself was now a terrain to be contested.
Standard defensive doctrine screamed for fortified strongpoints, kill zones, layered armor. The Luzhin feast on such doctrines. Their tactical AIs are built to solve hard-shell defenses. Sergeant Rourke, hunched over a stolen municipal power schematic in the colony's sublevel, saw a different truth. "They own the sky," he muttered, his fingers tracing energy conduits like neural pathways. "We don't fight for dirt, we fight for seconds." Our fortification began not with trenching tools, but with splicing wires and rewriting code. We turned the colony's infrastructure against its intended purpose. Jenkins, our wiry combat engineer, didn't just mine the central plaza. He calculated structural stress points. A single-shaped charge on a supporting arch wouldn't collapse the plaza, but would render it unstable, forcing heavy units into a time-consuming detour through narrower streets. Streets Choi was already lining with piezoelectric triggers linked to industrial sonic emitters. Vasquez, our systems specialist, hacked the environmental grid. She didn't control the temperature, she controlled the illusion. A sudden, massive heat bloom from a residential block's thermal regulators would mimic the signature of a hidden artillery battery, drawing scout teams into hours of fruitless search patterns. My role was weaving these elements into a narrative of threat. From a command post in the hollowed-out shell of a water filtration plant, I used their own sensor ghosting against them, feeding their networks phantom signals, ghost squads, and false armor signatures. We weren't building a wall. We were building a maze where every turn ate another minute off the Luzhin clock. Our strongest material was not plasteel, but uncertainty. The Luzhin ground assault, when it came, was a masterpiece of synchronized silent lethality. Their troops, encased in adaptive gray polymesh armor that drank in light, moved like a single organism. They expected resistance. They expected a battle of attrition. They did not expect the colony itself to become a passive-aggressive opponent. The first Luzhin Lance entered the Grand Avenue, a wide boulevard meant for ore haulers. They encountered not a barricade, but a series of perfectly placed, seemingly accidental debris fields. A collapsed monorail pylon here, a spill of flash-hardening industrial lubricant there. Each obstacle was minor, but each demanded a pause, a scan, a cautious bypass, Jenkins's clockwork of delay. I watched from my nest, heart a steady drum against my ribs, as a Luzhin heavy weapons team was funneled into the Mercy Memorial Park, Vasquez's handiwork. On my mark, she triggered the park's subterranean irrigation system, now flooded with a non-lethal but intensely opaque polymer mist. For 47 minutes, a 50 million credit alien assault squad was blind, confused, and methodically probing a children's playground for threats that didn't exist. Private Miller, our scout, became a ghost. With nothing but a laser designator set to wide dispersal and a recorder playing the sound of massed boot falls, he convinced a Luzhin platoon that an entire company was flanking them through the smelter district. They spent 2 hours setting a complex ambush for an enemy that was, in fact, one man hiding in a ventilation shaft. We didn't fight to kill. We fought to confuse, to complicate, to consume. Our victories were measured in megabytes of corrupted Luzhin tactical data and the growing lag in their operational tempo. The silence on their command channels, which we intermittently cracked, began to fray with a new signal, not panic, but profound, frustrated irritation. By the 12th hour, the Luzhin advance was a stuttering, halting thing. They controlled 70% of the colony's map, but their momentum was gone, dissipated like heat in a vacuum. It was then, parsing a fragmented command channel, we heard the shift. The voice of the Luzhin ground commander, Vo, crackled through, stripped of its earlier arrogance. Analysis. Enemy resistance is non-linear. Resource expenditure does not correlate with territorial gain. They are not defending sectors. They are defending a timeline. Query. What strategic asset arrives at the terminus of this delay? He had pieced it together. We weren't an obstacle to be overcome. We were the hourglass itself. Every minute we stole was a minute less for his armada to fortify its position before the real hammer fell. Our beacon, a tiny, hyperdense quantum core hidden in the colony's main communications spire, had one function: to activate the moment Luzhin command and control assets were concentrated in a specific, predicted kill box. At hour 13, on the precise second Rourke had calculated days before, it pulsed. In orbit, the Luzhin fleet's elegant formation dissolved into sudden, chaotic urgency. Their sensors screamed with the brutal, uncompressed space-time signatures of human battlecruisers, the Hammer of Dawn group, tearing into the system. We hadn't called for rescue. We had scheduled a confrontation. The Luzhin faced a choice: engage a fresh, prepared human fleet from a disadvantageous position, or withdraw. Their logic was impeccable. They withdrew, not as a retreat, but as a recalculation. The cost of the rock had just been recalculated, and it was no longer favorable. Silence returned to New Providence. Not the imposed silence of jamming, but the deep, ringing quiet after a storm. We gathered at the dusty, pre-designated rally point in the old ore processing yard. No slaps on the back, no cheers. Sergeant Rourke did a visual check. Jenkins, Vasquez, Miller, all present. Injuries were cataloged with clinical efficiency. Ammunition counts recited. Our gear, coated in the fine gray dust of K-744, was packed with ritual care. Colonists began to emerge, blinking in the light, their faces etched with confusion and dawning relief. They saw 8 tired, anonymous figures in scarred armor, methodically erasing the evidence of our presence, disconnecting jury-rigged systems, collecting sensor nodes. We were not liberators in a glorious pose. We were technicians finishing a job. The victory belonged to the clock. Weeks later, in a secure intelligence brief, we saw the translated after-action report from Luzhin High Command. It was a masterpiece of cold analysis. Under tactical assessment, it read, "Encountered human delaying force, designation unknown. Composition, light infantry, estimated squad strength, material strength, minimal. Technological advantage, negligible. Strategic effect, maximum. Outcome, forced premature strategic disengagement, ceded tactical initiative." They finally understood the doctrine. We were the physical manifestation of a principle that against overwhelming force, the most powerful weapon is not superior strength, but the imposition of an unacceptable timetable. We held the line they drew around a worthless rock, and in holding it, we proved that one human squad with enough ingenuity and nerve could mortgage not just space, but time itself, and in doing so, buy a future. We were the stopwatch, and we had just told the Empire their time was up.